Welcome to Mentoring Moments. Mentoring Moments is a sub-series of the E-Commerce Edge podcast. It is composed of clips taken from Jason's one-to-one and group mentorship sessions. Hello, everybody, and welcome to another episode of the podcast. It is my absolute pleasure to welcome Samantha KOZUCH from Manuscripting to the podcast. Welcome, Samantha.
Hello, Jason. Thanks for having me.
My pleasure. And we were talking off air about the fact that you actually are originally from Australia. And I would not have picked that from your accent. But we also followed up with the fact that you latterly, in your latter teens, you spent the rest of your growing up life up till now in LA. And so obviously you've picked up a bit of an LA accent along the way too.
Yes. Had to blend in at a young age to prevent myself from getting picked on. So here we are today with a mixed accent.
And then you made the move from LA to Austin, which I think is a well-trodden path over the last few years. I know quite a few, as a California boy myself, born and raised, I know a heck of a lot of Californians who have made the exit or the escape, as they call it, from California to Austin.
Yes, we are loving it out here about 6, 7 months now here in Austin. And yeah, just like I mentioned, it's here or leaving the country next. So we're going to see what happens over the next few years.
That's what I did. Early 20s, left in New Zealand, spent almost 30 years there, and now living in Mexico. I took a similar path to you and maybe just a few years ahead of you.
Amazing. Love that.
And look, Samantha, I wanted to get you on the podcast as a guest mentor because I think what you have managed to achieve in your life is something that a tremendous percentage of my audience would love to achieve, which is financial independence, building your own e-commerce business, helping improve the lives of others, living a life of intentionality. It feels like I don't know, maybe you've achieved the holy grail, right? And through your manuscripting website and product and supporting products that go around that, you really are out there trying to help other people live a life of intention as well, to where instead of maybe hoping and wishing and dreaming that they could have a different life or a better life to what they have today, you're saying, hey, I want to actually help give you a pathway to get there based on my own experience and the successes I've been able to achieve in my own life, which is must be a pretty inspiring space to work in.
Yeah, it's super inspiring. It started for me back in my early 20s. I feel like I've just always wanted to help people. Like in my early 20s, I got into the influencer space because I was in the fitness industry. I was fitness modeling and acting, all that sort of stuff, and just showing and sharing my workouts online, which then turned into, okay, Sam, how did you grow? And this is before influencers were even a thing, right? There wasn't even that word yet. And then from there, it turned into people asking me, oh, how did you build your social media? How did you get brand collabs? How do you get sponsors? All these sorts of things. And I was like, okay, now I pivoted into being a social media coach, into helping people. Then from there, as I was launching my different companies and businesses, people then started asking me, I don't want to be an influencer, but how do I build and scale my business online? So then I slowly, after a few years, pivoted into being an online business coach. And then when the pandemic hit and all of my clients, students, community was panicking, I just started sharing my personal, like not only just morning routine, but how I stayed focused on my goals and how I got myself out of my rock bottom. And that literally included what's in the manuscripting journal today. So at that point, I wasn't even trying to create a product. That was never even in my goals list, like to create a physical product. But as I was sharing these things, people were like, hey, what are those journal prompts? Hey, do you have a download for this or something like that? And that's when it hit me as an entrepreneur. It's like, oh my gosh, I have something here. And then from there, it just turned into, okay, I need to put this into a physical product. This deserves more to be than just some PDF download on the internet. And then from there, I literally just jumped into e-commerce, having no idea what I was doing, but just with that drive and belief, oh my gosh, this literally is going to help people. And that's what drove me to where I am today.
And I'm going to take a wild stab in the dark here, and I'd love you to tell me whether I'm right or wrong. Manny scripting. I'm guessing it's a combination of manifesting and scripting, as in journaling and as in writing. Is that how you came up with the name for your brand?
You got it. And that just came from literally me like writing down a bunch of words as every single URL, every single social media handle, I swear, is like taken on the internet and or trademarked. So I just went down the route of knowing like whatever name I create for this company, just being an entrepreneur and owning multiple companies. I'm like, this has to be something that's trademarkable. And I finally just started just smashing words together, and manuscripting was born. And it's like, I'm obsessed. It's now turned and has been coined into a verb of manuscripting online as well now too, which is really exciting.
Wow. When you get to a place where you're used as a verb, almost like Googling, then you've probably achieved a certain level of success. It's pretty rare. It's rarefied air. Let's
Yeah.
put it that way. And when you first started out in terms of online coaching, and even when you were building a following online through social, etc., did you always have this vision that, hey, I don't want to work for the man, so to speak, or I don't want to work a 9 to 5. I don't want to have a boss. I want to have more freedom in my life. I want to be able to do the things I love and have a passion about, as opposed to just doing something that makes a living for me. Was that always the intention, or did the stars just align and say, okay, cool. I just naturally, through the things I'm doing, through my modeling, through my fitness influencer work, I'm building an audience. I don't necessarily know yet how I'm going to monetize that audience, so to speak. Maybe even don't have an intention to monetize that audience. But then when it came time to think about, okay, what do I do next? Then you thought, I've already got this audience. How can I help the audience and make a living doing it? Was that kind of all intentional from day one, or was that an evolution over time for you?
It's definitely been an evolution, but I still remember to this day the moment I decided that I am never ever going to wanted to work corporate or for somebody else. And that was actually in college when I had to get a job while I was in college. And I was working at some like literally like the college bookstore, right? T-shirts, books, like all this sort of stuff. And the manager or owner, I don't even remember, I think he owned the store, but he was just so awful. And there was a couple weekends, you're in college, your friends are leaving town or going on spring break or something. And I put in my requests to go, even though someone would cover my shift. And he was all like, no, you have to work. And that was my first moment of F this. I am never going to let someone else have power over how I want to live my life. And from that moment, I was like, never again. I quit. And then I ended up like literally pushing myself more into the modeling, the acting, the social media influencing, all that sort of stuff where I decided, even though it's quote unquote harder, I was the one going out getting contracts and hustling and booking gigs and all that sort of stuff. And I became really good at it and it became my full time income. So from there, that's how it started. And as it started growing and evolving, I don't know if it was just intuitional or just as start your entrepreneurship, you just start learning more. Oh, you learn that you can monetize things and grow. And it just started steamrolling into this big thing of making money and building community and a following and email lists and all these sorts of things. But throughout my entire journey, what I think differentiates me from most entrepreneurs is that I really always followed my gut and my intuition on things. And there were certain times when I started certain companies, like for a certain amount of years, I actually had a video production company where I was making marketing videos for companies, which today is now called UGC and like influencing marketing agencies. I had one of those before that was even a thing. And there was a point in time where I didn't want to do that anymore, but it was making me really good money. And that's when I really wanted to step more into coaching. And I just couldn't run both companies at the same time. And logically, to shut down that company, like it was making multiple six figures, it didn't make sense logically. But in my gut and in my intuition, it was like, Sam, you have to shut this down. And it wasn't a sellable asset at the time because I was the product, right? So I learned so many things along the way. But from there, it's okay. I pivoted into social media, like coaching and all of that. And then even again, when my coaching business was again making multiple six figures, I then made the decision to pivot into starting from scratch, from literally $0, zero community, zero anything, even with the manuscripting journal. But I knew deep down inside, like this is the next thing, and you need that time, energy, and space to create it. So it has been a evolution, but it's also been me just trusting myself, seeing the writing on the wall, trusting like that it was going to work out because I had such a passion and such a drive for it as well.
And when you first started out with the manuscripting journal, what was your process of building a community? Did you build the community before you had the product? Did you build the community as you were releasing the product? Did you do digital marketing, or was it pure organic? Was it pure social? When you first started doing this, and this was as I understand it, was the first time you had ever developed a physical product to sell via e-commerce. Before, pretty much all of your other services were digital services, so that you could provide them through digital channels. Now you've got to actually go through the product development process. You've got to find a contract manufacturer. You've got to pay up front for those products. You've got to warehouse those products. You got to decide, am I going to ship them myself or via 3PL? There's a lot that goes into creating and distributing a physical product. And hey, am I going to sell this through resellers, through retail, only through my own channels, through e-commerce? There's a lot to think about when you're thinking of the business model and the product development lifecycle. There's a lot more to that than developing a digital product and going to market with it. Like when I started my consulting business, it was like, okay, sure, I still needed to think about my pricing model and everything else. But once that was nailed, I could go to market with it immediately. I didn't have to go and produce the product before I could sell it. So this is a completely different ball game to what I guess you had experience with. So how did that story emerge and evolve?
So the story began with this company is I took basically from my personal Samantha KOZUCH Instagram account where I was already sharing this stuff. And I just asked for 20, 30 women, hey, would you ladies want to come for 30 days with me to beta test this journal? Because I knew at this point I had something because I was already getting the feedback, but I wanted to actually test it, right? So I did that for 30 days with them. Throughout those 30 days, all I asked for is I gave them a download of the journal prototype. I was like, all I want you to do is just use this for 30 days, do weekly check-in calls with me, just give me feedback on if it was working, what you're experiencing, all that sort of stuff. For those 30 days, every single person in the group was giving incredible feedback, like life-changing different things that they had accomplished or manifest, all these things. I was like, okay, we are onto something here. Then from there, I sourced a manufacturer. I found a couple different ones, finally went with one just to even get a sample made of the journal. And from here, like I did not know anything about manufacturing, importing, shipping, all of that. And most people, what I see is they get so caught up in the later steps of, I don't know how to ship. I don't know how to manufacture. Where am I going to store this? I have just learned throughout my entire career, like you just have to take the next step. And I just kept going with that. So I got my sample. It looked great. From there, I instantly started an Instagram page and started promoting that Instagram page all organically. Because at this point, I knew that I was having to shut down my other coaching businesses. So I was having to preserve cash and I wanted to start off with building this community organically. So started with that and a Facebook group. And I just started using that one sample journal to just create social media posts, Instagrams, all of that, really starting to hype it up. We got our first 200 journals manufactured, which is very expensive when you're doing such low MOQ. But we got those made. Then shortly after that, we got our like about 2,000 done. But this was all also in the heart of the pandemic. And as we were getting our first manufacturing finished, is when they started closing all the ports. So our journals, when we were supposed to launch before Thanksgiving, before Black Friday of, I think it was 2020, our journals were stuck in the ocean for 3 months.
Oh dear.
We had this long delay. Like I hit every single obstacle possible that would want to make someone throw in the towel. I had, because we did pre-sale, customers were angry and whatever. But what got me through is pure transparency at that time, saying journals are stuck in the ocean. And at the time, the whole world was experiencing that. So it was very easy, but I was just communicating, they're coming. Don't worry. People were thinking we're a scam because, there's no reviews even online. There's nothing really about the manuscripting journal
Yeah.
anywhere. But so once they came in, those got out. And really the first year was a lot of organic. I had very little amount to budget for paid marketing. So I was just really super reliant on creating this community, getting girls to post about their journal and to share it and all of that. So from there, that's how we went. And when it came to shipping, at the time, I was living in a 2-bedroom apartment with my now fiance, and we turned our spare bedroom into literally a shipping warehouse. And it was just, even our living room, our family room, everything in this apartment was just packed with boxes and boxes of these journals. If you go to my Instagram account or TikTok, you'll see like years back where I'm just sitting there just packing one by one, hundreds and hundreds of journals month after month. But that's just how I did it. And we did that for about 2 years. I did that for 2 years where I was customer service, I was packing and shipping, I was manufacturing, I was design, social media, like truly everything to get this brand off of the ground. And now we are at a point, we're going into our 4th year now where We now are in a 3PL. I have a customer service team. I'm still obviously handling most of the manufacturing, like just overseeing it, but I still do the design. I'm still the one that's leading inside my communities. We have now moved away from Facebook. We moved away from Facebook very quickly over to Mighty Networks, where we have our private app and community there. And now I just focus truly on building community and support for the Manuscripting Journal. And that's where we are at today.
Wow, very exciting. And I noticed that you are on Shopify. You use a very typical D2C commerce stack. You've got Klaviyo running for email. You got that traditional, if we think of almost like the Lego building blocks of an infant D2C brand and business that's headed by a solopreneur. And in your case, you were a Jill of all trades and you're covering all the bases yourself from day dot, along with your fiance, of course. The reality is that did you always, when you first started out, did you start out on Shopify? Did you start out with this stack that you knew was going to be able to grow with you, that you had confidence in? Hey, I saw many other D2C brands following this well trodden path of this certain stack that I knew would be able to sell, wouldn't be able to sell at scale. I'd be able to sell internationally, etc. It's got a good ecosystem around it. I would be able to get help if I needed it. Did you start there, or did you make some mistakes in the beginning and have to migrate onto different platforms and do different things and pivot?
Yeah, I started on Shopify, and that's all thanks to my fiance because he actually has an e-commerce company. He has an electric bike company called Story Bikes. So he's the one that kind of mentored me in a sense where, okay, this is what you need. We're starting on Shopify. They use Klaviyo, so like we're using Klaviyo. Luckily, that was like a great platform for us to use, and then slowly built upon that. Went through installing and uninstalling different apps depending on what we needed, but right off the bat, I started with a good solid platform that we could build off of.
And man, doesn't that make all the difference in terms of distraction? If you start out on a platform that isn't able to grow with you, then basically stopping business, migrating to a new platform, installing new technologies, integrating it with different back office systems. I always say if you can start with as close to a complete system as you can, even from day one, without spending, because I think the cheapest Shopify plan is like 29 bucks or something like that. So we're not talking, it's not a ridiculous amount of money. And then as you evolve and as you grow, you can move up the tiers of Shopify into Shopify Plus, etc. But I think if you can at least start with a solid foundation from day one, then that is mental and emotional bandwidth that you don't have to allocate to tech and process. That is mental and emotional bandwidth you can allocate to growing your business and perfecting your product and your go-to-market fit.
Yes, exactly.
And sounds like that's how it worked out for you. And now you're as I understand it, like a multi-million dollar business on manuscripting. And who would have thought that? I'm guessing that when you first started out, you had no idea that it would turn into the empire that it is today. And did it surprise you, or did you always have this vision? Yeah, I think this is. I think I've hit on something good here. This first set of 30 women who are effectively beta testers of my product to try to help me nail product market fit out of the box from day dot. You thought, no, actually, the feedback I'm getting tells me this has real legs.
Yeah, I from the beginning, like I don't know, it's so interesting because I just feel like with everything that I do, I always have big goals and aspirations and high hopes, and I always go 110% into anything that I do. But yeah, at the same time, it is so wild with how fast we've grown. Like we're no unicorn, right? Like we didn't do a million in our first year or anything like that. And that's a whole nother subject to talk on. Like our first year, we barely hit six figures. And when you're an entrepreneur and when you're seeing all these other brands and the highlight reels on social media, and they're like hitting multiple six figures or multiple millions in their first year, it can be very discouraging. Like you could truly believe, oh, I barely hit six figures. My brand, my company, my product sucks. But what kept me going through all of it is literally the testimonials and the feedback that I got from the women that were in the community and used this journal. And that's what literally drove me to keep going. Because throughout those first 2 years, like it was not easy. Like it was a 24/7 job and it was hard work, like packing and shipping orders. We lived like even living in a like on the second floor, we didn't have an elevator. I was carrying down hundreds of boxes every day to UPS. Like this is not for the faint of heart if you're starting out, and especially we're bootstrapped. Like we don't have investors and I don't have all this extra cash funds to hire a team and do all these different things. But that's what truly kept me going throughout all of it.
There's a saying that says the higher the hurdle or the more difficult the hurdle, the more powerful the sense of success or the more powerful the sense of achievement. Amazing stuff. It's very rare. Now, how important has to your business and to your personal brand, how important has it been to move away from a complete and total dependence on communities built on social media platforms to building your own independent community on Mighty Networks? And there's many community building platforms out there, but Mighty Networks is one of the most well known. There's Kajabi. There's a whole bunch of platforms out there that are designed around the concept of content, community, and commerce. But how important do you think it's been to your long term sustainable success to get out of that over reliance on social and to be building something that's independent and uniquely you and presents a unique value to your community? It's probably hard to quantify, but how important has it been to you personally to do that?
Oh my gosh. It has been the number one thing. And even when I first started this journal company, I never went out and really did market research. Like, I wasn't, what I've learned throughout my entire career is like blinders on. Yes, look at trends and stuff, but also blinders on because I don't want my vision to be muddled by other people's. But the one thing from day one, the importance of community, I already understood that from just being an influencer and just knowing, okay, you have a big community, like that's super important to sell anything or even just to help teach people or inspire people. But the second thing is that when I went through my life-changing rock bottom in my mid-20s, I was so alone. I didn't have anyone to turn to. There wasn't communities and stuff like that, like there is now on social media that you can get easy access into. But going through that pivotal time in my life, luckily I had a big enough unhealthy ego at the time that just drove me through like the whole I'm going to prove them wrong, I'm going to get myself out of this shit, all that sort of stuff. But what I also knew is wow, like so many people don't have that drive. And if they're, in their rock bottom or hate their lives or anything like that, like they're just going to be stuck in that if they don't have a community to turn to. So I knew the number one thing with launching the journal is you're going to have a community. And that's also something that kind of differentiates us from a lot of other popular journals out there because for a lot of them, you don't even know who the founder is. You never see of them and they don't have a community that you can turn to. And that was something that I just knew I needed to have for this. And then also, the one reason why we moved away from Facebook groups to our own app on Mighty Networks is because on Facebook groups, you're now fighting the algorithm. That was the point where Facebook groups are working really well. And then from there, now you're fighting the algorithm. Girls weren't seeing our notifications, girls weren't seeing their posts. Also, when they logged in to Facebook, even if their intention was to go to the group and join the live or comment on posts or whatever, they're getting distracted by every single thing else on Facebook: ads, posts, comments, DMs, all those sorts of things. So immediately I looked for an app hey, where's something private that we can build? And I didn't want to go out building our own app. It's expensive. I've done it before in the fitness industry. So I wasn't ready for that yet. So I'm like, okay, came across Mighty Networks. It basically functions like a Facebook group. But guess what? When the girl logs into that app, they're only seeing stuff from our community and they don't have ads. There's nothing but that. So it was just like the most beautiful place. And then of course we own all of our members. We have their emails. We can pull all of that data from there. We can see what's being used. We have so many more analytics on that app than we would on a Facebook group. So the importance of that for us was just super key. And we run, even right now, we're in the middle of our first annual challenge, which we have thousands and thousands of women that sign up for that. So it is so important. And I always preach that to anyone out there, no matter what your product is, build that community because that's where people come together because they're not always going to be posting about it on social media and stuff like that. But in the community, you can get a really good grasp of what the customer wants. Like even every quarter, we release a new color cover of the journal. I'm doing polls in there. I'm getting the girls to vote on colors, tell us our feedback. What features do they want to see in the journal next? What ones are they not using that they want us to take away? So I am constantly in it with my community. And that's just something you can't cultivate just on a social media post or just through an email or SMS. So building community, I highly recommend for anyone that's building a brand, a product, whatever it is, build it because they will come.
Yeah, it is the field of dreams in some cases. There's times when it doesn't happen, and I think, unfortunately, we see that there's an extreme success bias, survivorship bias on social media around the brands that have managed to do similar to what you have done, or even brands that maybe started out drop shipping and they found some success drop shipping, and now that market is so saturated and so competitive that most people who start out drop shipping today are going to fail. That's the reality, and I'm seeing it every day. And I'm on Reddit, and I'm trying to help people, and I'm trying to they say, hey, look, I've set up my website. I've been up and running for 3 months. I've invested $10,000 into meta ads. I haven't made a single sale. Can you go and rip apart my website? And so I try to help as many people as I can through those situations. But it's literally, you can see 20 posts, 30 posts a day with the same sob story about how they thought building an e-commerce website, getting a few products listed, and running a few ads was their own personal get-rich-quick scheme. They had an expectation that this was going to be easy. I don't know why. Maybe it was because someone told them it was going to be easy. Maybe they were looking at all the success stories on YouTube and Facebook and Instagram, and they thought, that person doesn't look any smarter than me, so why couldn't I go and do this for myself? And I'm sick of working for the man, so why don't I start my own business? But they don't necessarily start a business around something they're passionate about. Their sole goal is to get rich fast through e-commerce. And I guess what I would say, and I'd love your thoughts on this, if sole goal in starting your business is to get rich quick, that's probably the fastest way to not get rich quick. So in my business, with what I've done, and as I look back across my career, anything that I thought was going to be fast was typically either A, something I didn't enjoy, or it didn't end up being fast. It ended up taking much longer to achieve than I ever thought possible, because you got to be able to pivot, you got to be able to adjust, you got to be able to adapt, you've got to get feedback from the market, you've got to have a market to begin with that you can create a feedback loop through. So when you start thinking about, and I'm sure a lot of the women that you work with not only get value out of your manuscripting journal, but I'm guessing that they also rely on you as almost, and obviously the other women in the group, as almost like a support network and an advice network. And I'm guessing a lot of these women come to you and say, hey, look, I'd love to start my own business. Where do I start? What's step one? What's step two? What's step three? I want to stop working for the man. I want to do my own thing. I want to be independent. I want to be like you, basically. And what is typically your advice when one of the ladies comes to you and says, Samantha, I want to be like you. What do I need to do? What's the 5-step plan or the 10-step plan? Hey team, I have a big favor to ask you. Please pause this episode and send the link of this episode to someone you know that you think would enjoy this content. Really appreciate you spreading the word. This is how we grow. We're not a Joe Rogan. We don't have big, massive advertising budgets, but we absolutely want to grow. We want to get the learnings from all of these episodes out to as wide of an audience as possible, and we need your help to do it. Thank you. And now back to your listening.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more with you on everything that you just said. And I'm not going to lie, there are times that I see these coaches and stuff like that that are in FBA, drop shipping, and all these sorts of things that making so much more money that even we are right now. And I'm like, oh, let's just find a product and go do that. And I'm just like slapping myself. I'm like, nope, that's not the way, because you're so right. It's a long-term game. And what my intention for creating and starting this brand is, it's the long-term game. Like eventually, I don't know, maybe a few years down the road, maybe someone will buy us and we will sell and I will exit. Like that is, I'm building something for the long term and not just a quick money grab, because I just don't see that it exists. And here's the thing, that if you do build something where you're just like doing it for whatever, it's trendy right now, cool. That will work for maybe 3, 6 months, maybe a year, but then you're going to have to start over. And I couldn't imagine, with the effort that it takes to build a brand, to build a product, to build a company, like to have to start over again so soon. So whenever any of the women in my community, or just anyone in general, even on social media, comes to me and says, I want to start my own company, I want to be an entrepreneur, I just share what you just even said right now. Look, this is a long-term game. This isn't a get rich quick scheme, but ultimately you have to figure out what it is that you are truly not even just passionate about, but just know that it's not easy. And for them to just figure out what that is for them. And sometimes, even early in my career, I was dabbling with things that I was just good at. It didn't mean I was like fully in love with it and passionate about it, but I was just really good at it. And from there, I learned and picked up different skills and tools. Like, for example, when I was an influencer, I started learning how to post on social media, then learning how to figure out how to create PDF workouts and a website. And oh, now I have to build an email list and SMS. Like, I picked up different things along the way. So ultimately, it's like just getting started, knowing it's going to take time, and having also some sort of other source of income so that you're not giving up so easily in building your business to then have to quit and go get a job again. So I think ultimately it is just deciding what is your reason for being an entrepreneur and knowing yourself enough. Hey, can I actually go through the struggles that entrepreneurs face? Not just looking at people's social media highlight reels saying, oh, I made 100K in 30 days. Yeah, all of those people, I guarantee you, they might have done 100K in 30 days, but I guarantee you it probably took them 5 years to do that. They had multiple failures behind them. They had multiple things that they had to go through. So that's the one frustrating thing about social media, is that all the snake oil and the lies and all that sort of stuff, there's no transparency there. But I think a true entrepreneur, you're a self-starter. You're going to go figure it out. Like even me with coming into e-commerce, I didn't have a coach or mentor. I didn't do any of that. You know what I did? I went straight to YouTube. I started subscribing to e-commerce podcasts, such as like this one. And I started listening. I started learning. You as an entrepreneur, you're a self-starter. And I think that's another thing that's going on in the social media and podcasting space is people saying anyone can be an entrepreneur. No, they can't. Some people have to be told what to do. Some people are not self-starters. Some people don't have the drive. They don't have the passion to get through the struggle of multiple days in a row, like crying or wanting to throw your computer out the window and just give everything up. Like it takes so much grit to be an entrepreneur, and it's not for everybody. And you just have to, at the end of the day, be real with yourself. Hey, can I actually go down this road? Or am I more comfortable in a corporate career? And neither of them are wrong and neither of them are like bad or anything, but it's, you have to honestly be real with yourself. And that's honestly my advice. A little bit harsh, but it's like it's the truth and someone needs to say it.
Wow, man, that's just true. It's funny because I would almost boil down everything you just said into one word. If I had a gun to my head and I had to put one word to it, I would say it was grit. And I think that what we see today is a new generation of entrepreneurs that don't realize that the previous generations of entrepreneurs, first of all, it's easier than ever today to start a business, but it's probably more difficult and noisy today to ever build a successful business. Anybody who sets up a Shopify store and spends 3 hours configuring Shopify and getting ready to sell, all of a sudden now they can technically call themselves an entrepreneur because they've started a business, whether it makes no sales or not, right? And they'll put it up on social media. Hey, my website's gone live. Here's my URL. Good luck to me. But then when they shut down the website quietly 3 months later because it put $10,000 into meta ads but didn't make a single sale, they went to Reddit to try to find some help and they didn't get it because they didn't have any money to pay for professional help. And so they just quietly shut down their website, quietly shut down their business and faded away and went back and worked for a bank. We don't hear that. We only hear the screenshots and, hey, I set up my Shopify store. I've got my products in stock. I'm ready to sell. And so I think where the grit comes in, and I'll give you an example of grit in my own life, and I'd love to see whether this resonates with you. So I don't make money off my podcast, but it is such an intrinsic part of my personal brand and how I like to give back to my community that it's a real priority for me. But I tell you, it's a heck of a lot of effort and it's a heck of a lot of time. And 3 episodes a week, we're talking minimum of 2 hours an episode to record, post, produce, edit, and distribute. We're probably talking a minimum of 6 to 8 hours a week just dedicated to the podcast. And in 2023, when we were traveling around Mexico, there were a lot of places where internet was questionable, where the environment wasn't perfect to record in, where it was hard, where it was difficult, where I had to move bookings, where I got to a location and the internet wasn't good enough to record from. So I had maybe 2 or 3 episodes booked to record that day, and I'd have to go back to the guest and I have to apologize and I have to move it to the next week or whatever it might be. But I still managed to deliver 3 episodes a week for the entirety of 23, despite the fact that it was super painful, it was super hard, and it was super challenging. So even though the podcast isn't a business in its own right, it's a priority to me. And so, and it's a priority to me to be consistent and to deliver to my audience as consistently as I possibly can with the most valuable content I can, because that's part of my personal brand. That's part of my commitment to my audience. And it's a part of, I guess, just making sure that I have credibility in the space, right? And also having respect for my guests and having respect for the people that are willing to share their knowledge too. But man, that takes grit. And I think that the more challenging something is, the more grit you have to have, because if you don't have that, it's really easy to say, oh, I'll just skip it this week, or no problem. My audience will understand. As long as I release an episode next week, we'll be back on track and we'll be all good. Or my client's waiting on this piece of collateral from me. It's all good. They'll wait another week for it. But no, I think if you commit to something and you give your word to somebody, then you should do everything in your power. We're not perfect and we will make mistakes, and there's times when we need to apologize for those mistakes. But in general, I would say if you commit to something, you better be prepared to commit to that something for a long term if you expect to get anything good out of it.
Yes. Couldn't agree more. And I actually launched my podcast about 3 months ago now. And I literally bought all my podcasting equipment 2.5 years ago to start. Okay. And I was like, no, don't have time. I don't have time yet. I don't have time because I knew how much of a commitment. And now I just release one episode a week. And that is to hear you do three. I'm just like, oh my gosh. Because yeah. And it's exactly what you said. It's that commitment and doing the things when nobody is watching. It's holding that commitment to you. Because even throughout the first few years of building my company and brand, nobody had any idea. Like I would post some behind the scenes of when I'm packing orders, but no one knew the amount of hours that were invested in just all the behind the scenes work of like website development or just like doing stuff for the website or packing orders, doing inventory, just like all of those things that someone like no one was watching or even just like waiting for anything. But I knew, hey, if I don't do this today, it's going to set me back. If I don't do this today, I'm going to lose the commitment with my customers, with my following, or putting out that podcast episode. Yeah, there are days like literally the day of that it's supposed to be launched. I'm like, my week has been so insane. I'm just like, oh my gosh, I have to record something immediately, like just to get it out. Like I have that commitment. And I think that's literally what it is. It's that grit, it's that drive and knowing and believing in yourself that, hey, if I commit to this, I have to do it. Because then on the other side of that, the one thing that starts to happen with the brain is when you make these commitments. And now, since we're around the new year and all these New Year's resolutions, right? It's like people set all these new commitments. And then by the end of the month, 80, 90% of them have quit. And what starts happening in the brain is the more often you start saying a commitment and then breaking it, you're literally programming your mind to think it's okay. And that becomes habitual. So if you want to change something about your life, start your business, be an entrepreneur, be a brand, like the first thing you really need to start doing is whatever thing you say to yourself, you have to do it. And most times, nobody's watching, no one's keeping track of you, no one knows if you're not, but you have to do that because it's a slippery slope of just going downhill the more often that you do that.
Man, that's so spot on. Keeping your commitments to yourself. I love that. That's a part of that whole self-talk thing. And I think we'll never be able to keep commitments to other people if we don't keep commitments to ourselves first. I absolutely love that. And how do you think about NPD, new product development? I know that you've got your community and they give you feedback about the evolution of your existing product, but how do you think about potential opportunities? For example, maybe you create a alternative brand to manuscripting that's targeted at men and the things that they go through, and helping men journal instead of women. Or I know you've got some complementary products on your site already, but when you start thinking about expanding either your existing brand or starting a complementary brand with complementary products, what does that process look like for you? Do you try to find a gap in the market, or is it mainly driven by, okay, maybe it's a woman in your group and she comes to you and she says, hey, I love this product. It's absolutely amazing, but my husband doesn't really want to write in a pink journal. Do you have something coming for my hubby that maybe I could give to him for Christmas or New Year's or something like that? And is that kind of the evolution of your brand and your product? Or how do you think about NPD, new product development?
Yeah. Yeah. So what actually the first year was just like the journal. Then of course, as there's conversations happening in the community, girls want this and that and the other. For example, we started off as a more on the spiritual side of things. We were teaching stuff about crystals and incense and chakras and candles and all of these different things. So as I was like learning what the community wanted and, oh, where can I buy this? Where can I get that? We started providing all those. We had a catalog of over like 100 items outside of the journal. And slowly over the last year, we started realizing, wait, we grew this catalog so big to the point where it didn't make sense anymore. Just looking at numbers and everything, it was so great to have a higher customer order value and things like that. But from having to inventory and warehouse and ship all these different items, it didn't make sense. So actually, over the last almost year now, we have been slowly but quickly selling out of those items, and we're going back just to being the journal. And we have a pen that comes with it and like a weekly planner that comes with it as well. But we're going back to basics of just being a journal company. And it's funny that you mentioned a men's journal, because that is something we have been asked for since pretty much since launch. So this year we are actually launching a men's journal for men, because even though men could totally buy our journal, there's nothing in it that's just female only. It's just really pretty, it's colorful, it's feminine. I totally get it. Guys don't want a pink journal. But also my fiance, he journals day and night. He was journaling and doing all this self-development mindset work before he even met me. So this wasn't even inspiration for the manuscripting for him. But he does that. So he'll be in charge of design of the men's journal that we'll be launching this year. So that is what we're going to be sticking to. We've learned expanding with all these different products, even though, yeah, like it's cool and great to be building this big brand. But at the same time, it's wait a minute. This is what started the
This is a
company. This is
distraction
what's
in a way.
growing, right? Let's not turn 100%, 100% distraction. So we're going back to that, and that's what we're moving forward with.
Love it. Love it. Absolutely love it. And have you guys thought about or are already doing B2B sales? Because obviously all of this to date has been D2C. Have you thought about, hey, we'd like to open up and de-risk our D2C business by having a B2B business that maybe we sell to stationery stores, maybe we sell to bookstores, maybe we sell to other retailers that are maybe we sell to a store that's already selling crystals and alternative therapies and aromatherapies and things like that. Do you think either you today or are you thinking, hey, we'd love to do B2B because there's a lot of retailers out there that would love to have this product on their shelves for their customers?
Yeah. And actually, when we were living in Los Angeles, we were in one shop over there in the mall and I don't even remember, Century City, Westfield. And that was our first experience with being in retail. And let me tell you, it was really hard for us. I thought this is going to do so great, right? People can see the journal. It's right there. It's physical. But at the same time, we didn't get the sales that we anticipated. And I think what it came down to is, one, we are a new brand. Two, when you pick up this journal, which I have right here, like it's a big book. Like it's kind of
Yeah.
like a textbook almost. One, that can be intimidating. And two, unless we had some crazy awesome display unit, being a big brand, like explaining the journal, how to use it or teach it, it was very, I think, overwhelming to customers, and they didn't know the brand yet. So
Mm.
what and apart from being on social media, you can look at a 15-second reel of ours and you'll know exactly who this journal is for, what it does, look at the pages, all of that. Like it's easier for us online right now. But as we are now growing bigger, we are becoming a known brand and all of this exposure on that. 100%, we're going to be focusing on B2B in the next couple years. Right now, we are on fair. So we do get some wholesale
Yeah.
orders from smaller boutique stores and stuff like that. But I think it's just going to come in time with as people start to get to know like what manuscripting is and it becomes a household name, then we will like look further. But right now with that first taste, it was like, okay, we see I don't think we're ready for that yet. And that's okay because we're on our own website. We are on Amazon, which organically on Amazon, the manuscripting is doing incredibly well. So I think in due time, we'll be working more towards pushing for B2B or waiting even for B2B to come to us too.
Love it. Absolutely. A good timing with B2B on Shopify coming to market now over the last year. So you won't have to migrate platforms when you're ready to do B2B in a big way. And you'll be able to just add all those B2B functionalities or a B2B storefront on Shopify, separate B2B storefront. So you've probably got good timing within the next couple of years that will come to fruition for you. And now listen, Samantha, it has been fantastic speaking with you. I appreciate your knowledge. I appreciate your experience. And as we come to the end of our time together, I always love to let my guests ask me one question, any question they like. It could be personal or professional. So, Samantha KOZUCH from Manuscripting. What is your question for me today?
Ooh, I have a good one that's non-business related. What do you like about, or what are the benefits of living in Mexico, outside the US, outside of Australia and New Zealand? What are the benefits? And also, are you still a citizen of anywhere, or did you go through the route of, what is it called? Did you
Yes.
not yourself? I
Yes,
don't know
yes.
the
No,
word.
I am a dual citizen and we are residents of Mexico as well. So expanding the range of options is always a good thing. I think of where you can legally live, having optionality is a very good thing. I think for me, probably the biggest benefit of living in Mexico is freedom. And it is, it's actually difficult to explain how free it feels living in Mexico versus living in the States versus living in New Zealand versus living in Australia because I have a significant amount of my family live in Australia. So and also when I worked in ANZ region, I was in Australia for a long time. I was in Australia once a month. So I know the Australian market very well. I know the Australian community very well. I have lots of Kiwi friends who live in Australia. My mom lives in Australia, my sister, my brother-in-law, etc. So I know the ANZ market quite well, and I know their governance structure really well. And I would say that in my experience, New Zealand and Australia are two of the most regulated, over controlled country in the world. Like virtually every facet of daily life. They are socialist countries. Let's not candy coat this here. They are socialist countries, right? And so you've got socialist healthcare, you've got all these things. And when the government and when the state provide all of these benefits to you, they also make the rules around and they dictate how you will live your life. And Australia, they've got no jab, no pay for benefits and all sorts of things. And so I think what I discovered the longer I lived in New Zealand is I just felt oppressed is probably the wrong word, but definitely felt suppressed in the way that I wanted to live my life to a degree. And certainly the cost of living associated with that style of government, the rate of taxation, the rate of regulation of businesses and how you run your business and what you can do and what you can say and how you can say it, how you can market things. It's just, it's actually a hard thing to describe. And you really only realize it when you move out of, for people that have grown up there and lived there their whole life, they don't know what the alternative looks like, right? And when we moved to Mexico, I'm a bit of a rebel and I've always been a rebel and I've never really done things the traditional way. I've never really liked to do things the traditional way. I've always liked to do things my way. And in Mexico, the Mexican society is very live and let live. For example, I'll give just one tiny example. So there's noise control in New Zealand, and they are very powerful. And if you make too much noise after a certain time at night, your neighbors can call and they'll come down and they'll shut down your party. They'll turn off your music. They'll confiscate your stereo. They will do all those things, right? In Mexico, no, you're on your own here. It is a noisy freaking country. There can be fireworks being shot off 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. There could be dogs barking. There could be music pumping. There can be bars open. Mexico is a massively noisy country. If you are moving to Mexico for peace and quiet, you are moving to the wrong country. It is a dynamic, wild, crazy, fun place, but it is noisy as hell. And on Sunday mornings, you're going to get church bells from 6 a.m. You are going to get fireworks shot off for weddings, for quinceañeras, for it is a hive of excitement here, right? It's just live and let live. That is the attitude in Mexico. It's I'm going to let you live your life, but you need to let me live my life in the way that so there's not those safety nets there. If you have a problem with a neighbor's dog, you're not, and it bites you or it bites your dog or something like that, there's not going to be animal control that's going to come and collect this dog. You're going to have to sort that out yourself. And so there's a lot more freedom, but there's a lot more responsibility as well. You need to take responsibility for your own life here because there's not those social and societal safety nets that are there for you. And I think one of the reasons for that is because Mexicans live by a pretty consistent code. It's 82% Roman Catholic in Mexico. And from what I can tell, and from all the Mexicans that I've met and become friends with, the priorities for Mexico are three things primarily: God, family, community, in that order. So they have a commitment to God, and that becomes a really core part of who they are and how they live their life and what they do on the weekends and things like that. They have a commitment to family. You don't see homeless people in this country. Like I'm sure they exist, but you see more homeless dogs here than you see homeless people, because the idea of family, letting a family member live on the street, is just anathema to the Mexican culture. It just doesn't happen that often. So if a family member is down and out and they lose their job or they lose their house or whatever, then they will go and live with a family member until they can get back on their feet again. And that's just the traditional way of looking after each other, because they have no expectation that the government is going to look after them, right? The third thing is community. Mexicans are very community orientated. They think and act in terms of their local community, their local churches, their local schools, their local sports clubs, their local everything. They think very much in a concept of this localized bubble. Again, because the government is going to step in and save you, you need to rely on your community to look after you and look after your family. And so, and again, this is very blanket, and I know this sounds very generalist, but it's just what I've witnessed. After over a year and almost 20,000 kilometers of traveling through this country, this is just what I've seen. And so I think that it's a combination of freedom and what I would consider probably more traditional values in that way. There's not a lot of wokeness here. There's not a lot of this sense of independence, and I'm just going to do my own thing, independent of who I hurt and how many people I have to step on. That's not really a concept here. And so it's probably those two things, the more traditional values and the sense of freedom that I have in Mexico. Those are the two things that really stand out to me.
Wow, that's incredible. I've never really heard or really even known, I think, someone that has lived there even just as long as you to give that kind of a description of what it's like. But it almost sounds like that's how we should be living everywhere. And it's so
Yeah.
sad to hear such a big difference between how we live in the US or Australia and UK and Mexico. Like what you just described is how we should all be living.
Yeah, and I think the thing that Mexicans realize is that everything they do impacts someone. Like we don't ever truly act in isolation. Maybe we think we're acting in isolation, but it always has an impact on someone somewhere, and it just feels like they're a little bit more sensitive to that concept. And Mexico's got its own problems. It's not a panacea, don't get me wrong. There's a lot of poverty here. There's a lot of people that are really struggling to get by. There's a lot of governmental corruption. There's rubbish on the streets, and infrastructure here is really challenging. The infrastructure is very poor in many places in this country. So I'm not trying to make it out that it's perfect, because I don't think any country is perfect. But I just think the mindsets here are a little bit more
Yeah.
the mindsets here are just a little bit more empathetic is probably the term I would use. So, Samantha, this has been a fantastic conversation. I've absolutely enjoyed it. I'm sure that what you have shared will resonate with my audience massively, especially as a guest mentor. And your experiences, I think that a lot of people, they want to emulate what you have done. They want to go down this path of slowly introducing more freedom, if nothing else, financial freedom into their life by doing their own thing. But as you rightly pointed out, it's not going to be an easy road. So get ready to pull your socks up and get to work, right?
Yes, absolutely. Thank you so much, Jason, for having me on the show.
If you'd like to get mentored by Jason for free, head over to greenwoodconsulting.net, scroll to the bottom of the page, and click Get Mentored by Jason.